You're listening to Tara Lynn's A Geek Saga podcast. This episode features audio from a discussion panel that was recorded at DragonCon 2019. Okay, so it's 6:59 and the room is full, so it's not like anybody else is coming in, so we're going to get started. Thank you guys for coming to the Game of Thrones final season panel. We have a few more Game of Thrones panels this weekend, but this is the only general panel about the final season as a whole, so glad you're here with us. My name is Tara. I'm going to be moderating geek cred stuff. I'm a webcaster, podcaster, author, and I created and organized Ice and Fire Con, which is the first ever Game of Thrones Song of Ice and Fire convention in the U.S. Andrew, you want to go next?
Yep, I'll just jump ahead. Hey, I'm Andrew Tedeschi. This is one of a couple panels I'm doing on Game of Thrones this weekend. I'm glad to be back. This is my 8th DragonCon. I'm co-host of the Stats Check podcast, and I help on the small council to run Ice and Fire Con.
My name is Chloe. You might know me from a podcast called Girls Gone Canon. We do a Song of Ice and Fire point of view character by point of view character, and we're also covering his dark materials. I also have a blog called liesandarborgold.com, and I help out with Ice and Fire Con. Official title, Mistress of Whisperers. So that's why my hair is so big, it's full of secrets.
Hey, I'm glad to be back from last year's Game of Thrones shenanigans. I'm Van Allen Plexico. I'm the author of 18 novels, including works that you might be interested in, like Baranek and Caroline, kind of high fantasy, sci-fi stuff. This is actually my 22nd DragonCon, believe it or not. I can myself, yeah.
Impressive.
It could drink last year. It's crazy. So, but I'm also the host of the White Rocket podcast. So we talk about stuff like this, Game of Thrones and related things, all the time on there at White Rocket podcast on iTunes and Podbean.
All right, before we get started, just like a little reminder, keep this in mind sort of thing. I'm sure there's going to be some tea served up tonight, okay? But just be respectful of other people in this room and their opinions, whether or not you agree with them, okay? Thank you. That said, I think we'll start by just each of us giving, a couple brief thoughts on how we felt about the final season, and then pretty soon we're going to turn it over for you guys to ask questions. So if you do have a question, just raise your hand and the microphone will come to you. So, final season of Game of Thrones, it was 6 episodes, and we were talking about this right before this panel started, about how maybe they just should have cut it off after episode 4.
Three, yeah.
But
Hell, let's go 2,
Yeah.
2 was the last episode of Game of Thrones ever. It was amazing.
yeah, Night of the Seven Kingdoms, it was amazing, and they could have
Little Dunkin'
just...
Egg reference there.
Cogman, what a redemption arc.
So yeah, I mean, listen, the final season, it had some high points. It really did. Honestly, the Dance of the Dragons that we got in episode 3 was pretty great. I get where they were going with some of the character arcs that they tried for, but they just didn't do a good job with them. And those are my 2 brief thoughts on this season for now. Anybody who wants to go next?
I like dragons.
Boy, do I have the show for you, kid. God, I got all these dragons right here in this trench coat. I am going to be the villain this whole panel. Yeah, it's really fun when you embrace it, right? So after watching the 3rd episode with a room full of 100 nerds at Ice and Fire Con, I ended that episode initially and I looked at my partner and everyone was cheering and I looked around, I was like, what? That was it? That's the White Walkers? That's it? And then I watched it again as a whole, the whole season, and the big beats are there. The tissue's missing, right? The story's great, but they didn't tell it, is my problem with it, the whole thing, right? It all makes sense, and if you've read the books, then it all is you're okay, I could see where these broad strokes probably will happen in this place. I'm reading this chapter, and this makes sense, but otherwise... When you have your mom calling you going, well, I just really didn't like this season, that's when you know it's bad. You know what I mean? It was just empty. I liked a lot of it though, but I loved the bold strokes. And even after the 3rd episode, I felt the chains came free and I will never criticize it again. I was it was TV. It's not TV, sorry, it's HBO. But it's TV. It was entertainment, and I mean, like, I was gonna watch it either way, let's be real. Like, whether I was petty about it or not. So I think they did the job, they got it done. I mean, these people have been doing this for 10 years. I don't even like my job, and I've not been doing it for that long, so.
This was a shorter season, and I just feel like we need those missing episodes. But I think in terms of judging the final season, it depends on the context you're looking at it. And we're all so spoiled, you know. We were talking about this in the Marvel movies panel, how if you look at certain Marvel movies recently in the context of comparing them to other last 4 or 5 years, then you might go, But if you compare them to, like, the TV show Captain America or Spider-Man, then you're like, oh my God, this is amazing, right? So it's all a matter of perspective. And I felt like, you know, in the Game of Thrones perspective, this season was rushed, but okay. But in the context of what we saw on television a few months ago, oh my God, you know, just the most incredible thing. I never dreamed I would see that on television. I thought I would be hard pressed to see that in a major motion picture, much less on a TV show. So
True.
Context matters.
Yeah, I mean,
I definitely agree that, you know, if it came to, okay, you know, if it's a larger question of would I rather have seen it like that or not seen it at all, I would say, as a person who's read the books, gone through it, I still say I'd rather have seen it like that. It's an adaptation, it's TV. It's obviously not the same thing as the books. They deviated long ago from that. And, you know, if you look at a lot of the elements, they're still there. I mean, like Chloe said, I mean, it's TV. You have to understand they cut out elements, but some of the elements are there. I don't really have an issue where they ended up actually watching it again. I rewatched it. And watching the last episode, I could see how it could get there, given some extra episodes, some extra, you know, content added to the seasons, maybe preceding this, or maybe stretching those out so we have sort of a season that just deals with the White Walkers. So that's sort of the cap of that season.
Yeah, they do. It's called a spin-off. That's why they didn't tell us the ending. I'm just saying.
Thank you, Chloe.
You're welcome.
But yeah, no, they could have done it with more.
Yeah.
You know, I gotta say though, the funny thing about that though, you remember last year at this time, I was comparing this show and where it was probably going to Babylon 5, and I was saying, you deal with the existential menace who is not human, and then you deal with the human threat. And that's more or less what they ended up doing.
Yeah.
Okay. The funny thing though is, same thing with Babylon 5. It ended early, and they got a 5th season later that was anticlimactic. They crammed everything into a smaller number of episodes. Same dang thing happened here, except there's not going to be another season where nothing happens, like with Babylon 5. You know, so it's really weird how the parallels are that they, once again, you have a great story that's taken years to build up, and then they just want to cram the ending in as fast as they can and wrap it up. It's too bad.
I feel like they could have actually done season 7 and season 8 as one whole big season, 1.5 hour episodes, 10 episodes, cut some of the filler, and just like, that would have rode real well. Like having those episodes and that, because I mean, everyone's mad about a lot of the stuff that happened, and we don't have to go into it yet, but like, some of the things that happen in the Targaryen camp during season 7, like burning of all the food in the Reach, like you think, wow, that was kind of wild, and then you forget about it come season 8. So if it was all one big stretch of like, this is 10 weeks of my life I just dedicated to it, it could almost make sense.
Well, and I don't think the year and a half or so
Yes.
that it was between the two seasons helped either.
It did not.
And you know, I recognize, like, before we got the season, they kept saying, oh, well, they're going to be longer episodes. But they weren't. There was like 2 that were longer. But, you know, we're talking like in previous seasons, they still had the 10 episodes, or what was season 7, 8 episodes. But they were all over an hour long, pretty much. And in this one, they were like right at an hour, except for I think 2 of them. And
like
one was like an hour and 20 minutes, and the other one was a little bit shorter. So it's like they weren't really giving us all that much more. And because of that, you know, it was rushed. And the filler from previous seasons, like you said, really like, it really showed where their issues lie.
I mean, the lack of elephants was astonishing.
Yeah, absolutely.
How dare they?
I really wanted those elephants.
Cersei really wanted those.
When they were directly adapting books that are already in print, they could take the long time to do all the little scenes that make you care or not care. And then when they went off the map and went on their own, it just became plot.
Well, and that's why George is so good, right? If you read the books, it's like, you're like, oh, this little tiny thing just equaled this. Holy crap. Like, and all 5 books later, you're like, that's just like in book 1 when he said this. Oh man, but like there's none of that callback in the show. Like there's some things where you're like, oh, this is an Easter egg from season 1. Did you miss it? Clickbait. But it's like it's not as deep. It ain't that deep.
Well, I mean, we were talking on the Heroic Journeys panel this morning about Bran and the fact that, like, you know, at first when you watch this season, it seems kind of, what the heck? Like, how is Bran the one who ends up on the Iron Throne? But it really makes complete sense, and it's. You know, I really do believe that it's leading up to that in the books as well. Oh, yeah. The difference is we're going to, the writers, the show itself as a whole kind of ignored. I mean, Bran wasn't even in an entire season. Yeah. And then after that, he was just this side character. So like to have him shoved in our face like that at the very end, it doesn't ring true. Just like, you know, Dany's, you can tell me as much as you want that, you know, Dany, like, the foreshadowing, she crucifies the master, she burns the stuff in the Reach. You can tell me all you want that that's leading up to her turning this way, but in this season, it just felt forced and fast.
It was hollow. It was completely hollow, and like, that's the bummer of it.
I mean, I don't think it's that fair, Chloe, to completely hollow, because you had your moments where you did really connect. I mean, like, even, you know, watching, especially episode 2, I thought, like, of all the episodes...
when she, like, looks, you can see that, like, distance, but the problem for me is more that, and we talked about this in the Heroes panel, that there's a big plot missing from the books in the show that gets cut, and this plot is what, in the books, you can see now, that's what's going to drive Dany to, like, be like, no, screw y'all. There's a big character missing in the show, so, like, when they cut... The problem is the butterfly effect. In Season 4 and Season 5... and not counting all of the other little things that were cut, but they started cutting things to try to get through things faster, and they had this outline as of 2013 before Season 3 was even in pre-production. So they visited with George between Season 2 and Season 3 pre-production, and they got the whole down low of, here's your big plot points. This person ends here, this person ends here, good luck, I trust you guys, have a good time, have a ball. And they just chose not to get to some of them very well, in my opinion. I mean, they did know a lot of the broad strokes. It's not like they didn't know. I don't like that whole excuse of, well, they didn't have a book to go off of. Okay, well then, write. It's not that hard. I read
There's
a lot of
fanfic out there.
Some of which is debatably better.
Right.
In the first few seasons, a portentous look from Dany would have led to something that led to something that led to something, and eventually it would be important. But by the last season, that portentous look, that's what we had to go by. Oh, that's why she turned evil or whatever, because she was mad about that thing that happened that one time.
It felt like we were missing something, like there was an inside joke that we were missing. Like she forgot her shape to concealer one day and now she's mad.
You set that up by all those betrayals, right, in all those interactions, and taking out a lot of those interactions, some of the, you know, Ironborn coming over to Slaver's Bay, you know, all those interactions she'd have there, taking out Dorne, taking out Quentin, you know, really paring that down, that all stacks up. No Fagon, you know, I mean, clearly if you've already had another Targaryen pretender, and you got Jon coming up with this bullshit, she's clearly done with it by then.
Yeah, he's
versus just
freak her out.
Hey, you know, I know we've been sleeping together, but also
we're related.
Nobody cares about that. It's Targaryen.
No. Yeah.
You know what? I did love something. I really loved this season was Varys. Even though, like, because they gave him a purpose this season, I guess, and I guess they were like, "Yeah, Conleth, we got you. Here's some pages. Read them." And he, I mean, his acting was amazing, and that whole like execution scene was. It was. I think it will happen. Not like that at all, but I do think it'll happen because he is betraying Daenerys in the books, obviously, with a couple other people. And again, that's some of the stuff that will lead her to be like, I will light all of you on fire for fun, or for just because you took my birthright. But like his writing and sending letters and that political intrigue, it was back, right? It's what makes you love season 1, 2, and 3. Like watching Tyrion in the small council meetings, or Tyrion going around and doing his little clever quips with Varys, and it just brought some of that back, and it was awesome. And I think they reached really hard trying to get some of that OG feeling back, right? Some of that season 1 kind of like, here's your favorite characters, and now they're all in a room and they're going to talk politics. But that very stuff felt great.
Yeah, the Tyrion stuff not as much, but the very stuff.
Yeah. But the very stuff felt good. It was a good purpose for him. It was.
Does anybody have any thoughts? Like, I do like to involve the audience. We can keep chatting at you, but I feel like we can't be the only ones with opinions.
Yeah. Even if it's just like favorite or least favorite moments.
Yeah.
If the people in the back who have questions, of course they are.
So I was sort of interested when I saw the very end to think back at how I can't can't even think of his name now. How he had gone back in time and changed Hodo from a very young boy. How much was he actually influencing everybody through all of time, you know, to really get to that point, you know? Because I'm fascinated by time travel, and he was basically doing it.
I think that Hodor was probably, that was when he realized that he was the one that caused that issue. I think that because they never touched on the fact that he could affect things again. So I think once he figured out that he'd made that mistake, I don't think he was going back and fiddling with things. I mean, there's theories about how Bran was actually, who is it, Bran the Builder? Or something, like he was warged into all these, he's all the Brans across time. I would hope that's not true, because honestly, like, I'm not a big Bran fan in the books, because he, you know, and in the show, like, it's hard to say you are or you're not, because like I said, he was hardly even there. But like, not being a big fan of him in the books, like, a big part of that is because he's really weird, and he doesn't learn his lessons but he's a child, you know, and eventually I'm hoping he will. But yeah, I think I want to believe that once he realized that he had done that, he took a step back and realized he probably shouldn't go affecting things that happened in the past on purpose, for sure.
But for sure he did affect those.
Too, until he said, "Why do you think I'm here?" And then when he said that line, I was like, "Okay, now he had everything to do with everything."
The cheesiest thing in the world. Well, and so I feel like the characters that A Song of Ice and Fire operates off of internalized POVs, right? You're seeing each chapter from each character. So all the characters that are mostly internal, Sansa, Bran, all these different characters, those are who suffered the most from their characterizations, because they aren't showing the thoughts. And David and Dan said early on they didn't want to do flashbacks, which that obviously changed eventually. They did a couple little visions and flashbacks. But how easy would it have been to just be like, Isaac, we need one frame of you with your eyes rolling up in your head, and then we're going to take that frame and attach it to a bunch of really cryptic, random visions throughout season 5, which you're not in. But you're the king now. And so, I'm not bitter. He's a good boy. He's going to be a good king. It's just you could have showed it, is all. Yeah. But even that, like, that would have been a great flash, and you could have even added... That could have been a little bit of context of some of the historical stuff that we don't get in the show, right? It could have been just a little bit... They could have flexed. They could have flexed on us right there, but they didn't.
And that sort of like keeps that TV, once again, and I mentioned this earlier today, there's sort of a TV edge where you're going for a twist, you know? I mean, that's why, I don't know if you guys saw online, if anybody saw, like, the betting pools on, like, who's going to be king at the end, you know, and you got the odds tables and everything. Because up until the end, people were still guessing. You still thought, okay, it might go one way, it might go another way. And I think TV wanted that to be more surprising than necessarily it'll be in the books when we get that sort of same outcome.
Yeah. We got a question over here.
Yeah.
I don't know if the mic's on.
Oh, they couldn't hear
She
that.
made an irrelevant comment.
That's a shame.
She made an irrelevant comment.
Dang it. That didn't get out there. You just said.
I just always, since even before this character, with all the hype leading up to the final season, like, did it even stand a chance of living up to anybody's expectations?
No.
Fair point.
No, we're all brats.
No.
We are. Well, I mean, the thing is, like, let's be real. They spoiled us in the beginning.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, with season 1, for sure, we were so spoiled. Season 2 took a downturn, but season 3 picked it right back up. Yep. And then after that, it's like, you see, there's that drawing thing or whatever.
The horse.
The horse, where they're, and it's like getting progressively worse. But honestly, that's not even correct, because it was, like, really awesome with, like, a slight, season 2 issues, whatever. Season 3, again, like, real big uptick. And then season 4, not great. And then season 5 was awful. Yeah. Like, I'm not even sure season 5 was... I think it might have been worse than last season.
A lot of people complain about season 2 of Heroes. Definitely. A lot of people are like, writer's strike ruined Heroes in season 2, and I'll never watch it again because you're all cowards. And it had a great narrative going forward. But season 5 of Game of Thrones, 8,300,000 times worse than season 2 of Heroes, and I will die on that hill.
I almost quit watching the show by the end of season 5. I'm like, you're on probation.
Even people that don't read the books were like, what?
No. I said, you're on probation, and you got to show you're worthy of my attention again. And
season 6 was good.
It did. Yeah. I wanted to add one thing that I just had taken a little note about. I think it's telling and it's important. It probably wasn't on purpose, but it ends up retroactively being telling that the show was not called A Song of Ice and Fire. The show was called Game of Thrones because if it's called A Song of Ice and Fire, it's really a whole bunch of stuff going on around Jon and Dany, and it's their story. But the show, as it went on, got more and more a Game of Thrones about who's going to be the king, And Jon and Dany kind of they were still important, but they just became one element of a much larger contest to win the throne. And that to me was disappointing because I don't think that's what the books were ever really about. But because they named the whole series that, it almost like psychologically everybody assumed that that's what it was about. That's why I was very happy when the dragon melted the throne. By the way, if you listen to our show, I totally called that. I told John, my co-host, I said, the one thing I know is going to happen in the last episode is that dragon is going to melt that throne. And he's like, oh, absolutely. And when it happened, I'm like, yep. That's like the biggest
symbolism in the world. Absolutely.
And the thing is, it's easier to understand from a TV audience standpoint. I mean, everybody knows Survivor, competitions where, you're competing to the last one there, last man standing. That's a lot easier to digest than prophecy. And I think the book deals a lot with prophecy, which the show just doesn't give a damn. Right. I mean, Azora, what? The Valonqar prophecy with Cersei, what? No,
but to be fair, it's like you can tell the story without the prophecy, and that is actually a critique of the fantasy genre in general that, like, a lot of people say, like, George, you're writing prophecy, like Cersei's prophecy about her kids. She doesn't need that prophecy about her kids. It's great. I do love it, but my co-host of my podcast will die on the hill that, like, it's unnecessary. It's like she was still going to do this and her kids were all going to die and it was going to be her grief and it was all her doing because of that extension of power that she was using them for. It's interesting because the bold strokes were probably right for most of these characters, right? Like most of them probably right. Could have used some fine tuning or maybe like more writing. And I don't know. I feel like the backlash in 5 years, rewatch the show from like start to finish, and I don't think it'll be as bad then. I think you'll watch and go, okay, but I do think a lot of that, like, backlash, like, everyone's mad. I mean, that was me, like, 5 years ago. But I don't have the energy anymore. I'm getting old, man. I'm too old for the Game of Thrones discourse now.
When it comes around again, the pop culture will have embraced the idea that the ending was bad, and so people will go into it saying, well, let me see if I like it better than that.
Yeah.
Whereas this time the mindset was, it's supposed to be the biggest thing ever, let me see if I can find what's wrong with it. It's just a different mindset people will have.
I mean, you could always do what I did before this season and watch it backwards. It's like listening to a country song backwards, man. You get all your characters back and everything. It's great. We had a question
on the right.
Oh, over here somewhere?
Right over there, yeah.
So, jumping back to a earlier thing about Bran being king, in terms of the manipulation, I wouldn't necessarily go in with the whole time travel aspect, but that in the books, it definitely does seem like the Three-Eyed Crow is much less benign, or at least much less benevolent than he's presented in the show. So I'm much more willing to accept Bran as king if it is the end game for a long series of manipulations by the various iterations of the Three-Eyed Crow throughout history, particularly, in the reign of Aerys moving forward. Second thing, so yeah, the whole Drogon destroying the throne, huge symbolism. So what do we do with the released script that takes the intent, that takes all of that away, and it's just a dragon lashing out and burning everything?
I was going to note that, that they said it wasn't symbolic at all, and I'm like, dude, how could it just...
Yeah, well, no, just because there wasn't like intent on Drogon's part to burn the Iron Throne, like specific intent, doesn't mean that the symbolism isn't there.
Like, first-degree felony.
It's still symbolism.
So I would also argue, like, that script, yes, it's released for Emmys, and yes, it's still a turd. Like, I'll give it that. As far as Emmys go, like, really, that's your prize dog in the race. Get it together, Andrew. But...
Sorry.
But if that's your prize dog, yeah, I can understand that. But also, it's, like, not for us. No offense, like, it's for the actors who have played these roles for 10 years and they know what the hell they're doing for the most part. So I think it's just silly. It's just another thing to be mad about. I mean, like, and we can come up with that for years. I can give you yards of things to be mad about. Want to start? We'll go at, like, season 3. I'm ready. Like, I have them. They're in my brain. But that's one of them that I'm like, But Bran as the king is, like, it makes sense, especially when you look at it from the Arthurian level, right? You look at it like Bran the Fisher King, Bran the Broken, Bran the Blessed. In the books, it's very much set up. That missing season obviously detracted from it. But there's also a line... Is it both show and books? It might just be books when the Three-Eyed Raven says the ink is already dry.
Yes, that was both.
Yeah.
Okay, it was both. Yeah, and the ink's already dry. I feel like, and the way that they wasted Max von Sydow. Like, they wasted him. Like, and don't get me started on, like, Brother Ray. They wasted it. They wasted so many great guest stars. But Max von Sydow, like, when he delivered that line, the sadness in his face and the way he looked at him, he's like, Bran, you can't stay here anymore. Like, the longer you stay, you drown. I think that was supposed to be very telling for us, that if you lay in those memories and you mess with time, like, nothing good will ever come from it. And even if you have the power, if you're dialed into the weirwood.net, it's resisting that power. That's what would get him there.
And I think one of the things we do miss, and I think the Blood Raven is a great example, he was a very ambiguous, very morally gray character. He was a dick, you know, I mean, he would just straight up say, no, I've seen what's going on, these guys are spy, kill him, execute him, you know, very summarily. So, I mean, you do get that removed in the show when it's really very black, white, good, evil, light, dark.
Yes, what was the next one? Yes, hello.
Hi, really, what I had to say was something that, I don't know, the person who was an Alabama fan really had a lot to do with it. Really, how much of this was preordained, you know? Like, how much of it was, okay, so, you know, we like who we like already, and, we're just going to let them win, you know? What do you think about that?
When you say preordained, do you mean like by fans or by the writers?
Starks had a total sweep at the end, and really, everybody was going for the Starks early on. So, how much of that was just
Oh, listen. Okay, listen. The people who created this show absolutely had favorites, and they had characters that they didn't like. I honestly don't think they really liked Bran, or else they wouldn't have like shoved him off to the side for so long.
You could be Rick and it could
But
be
like,
worse.
I mean, but like you look at what they did like with Jaime, like the entire series. I mean, harkening back to season 2 when they had him kill his cousin for first of all, who doesn't even exist in the books, but like they made him a kinslayer on top of already being a kingslayer. And there was an interview from that season, and I can't remember if it was Benioff or Weiss. They're both awful, so it doesn't matter. But one of them said, like, Jaime, he's a horrible person. He's a murderer and a killer, and it's like that was how they felt about Jaime, and they never got beyond that. And like, please come to our Monday morning panel, the Nailed It or Failed It panel, because we will go into some depth on some of this. But yeah, there was absolutely favoritism and the opposite on the part of the show creators and writers and the way they treated these characters. I mean, even Brienne, like I loved Brienne in the show, but like it also she wasn't anything like she is in the books. You know, she was basically going around like murdering people left and right minutes after we met her, versus like in the books, she doesn't kill her first person until partway through Feast for Crows. Right. And Stannis is an entirely different story. So
yeah.
I mean, but you do get your moments once again with Brienne. I mean, I did like the moment. I mean, the moments that it was very emotional was obviously her being knighted by Jaime. I mean, that was an extremely impactful scene.
That's the penultimate moment,
right? And I think you could have added to that and built upon that by adding in those scenes that were missing, like Tara said.
But yeah, I mean, I don't think it was any sort of preordination by the fans or by the way like we felt. Yeah, sure, everybody wants to root for the Starks, man. They're the honorable ones, whatever. But I mean, that is how George, you know, they like Chloe said, they know the broad strokes. Yeah. So they knew that this was where Sansa was going to end up. They knew this was where Bran was going to end up. Not in this exact way, you know, maybe not in that exact wording, but they like Sansa's going to be the leader in the North. Bran is going to be king. Arya is going to be
something.
Her own version of Nymeria. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like This was all
arc from this morning.
Oh, was it?
Buddy.
I remember things.
Oh, I'm so glad we're growing together on panels this year.
Yeah.
Hello. So one of the things that really upset me was like Daenerys' descent, only because like I could tell that it was gonna happen. You know, the books, you can kind of see but I guess the thing that upset me about the show was that it was so out of nowhere that they had to use the preview for the episode to be like, hey, remember all these things? And then like in a really bad like kids TV show kind of way. Like I know your memory's like this long, so like here ADHD kids, here's your like real quick summary. And I really do think that they could have done just 1 or 2 more episodes.
Yeah.
I think it would have.
It would have just.
And they
got
were
us
offered
there.
that. They were offered, a whole extra season or 2 if they needed it. They just turned it down because I think D&D were already sleeping in their bed of money.
I think they've been sleeping in that bed.
I'm sorry. What the real thing is they'd already crawled into bed with Star Wars. Okay, they're like, peace out, Game of Thrones.
But I mean, it's not just them. Like that is unfair. It's fun to pour tea and screw D&D, but at the same time, it's like they are humans. They did the best they could do. Maybe the best they could do wasn't good. Maybe they're just not good at what they're doing. It's not everybody works in a job they're not good at one point in their life, right? So I mean. Maybe Game of Thrones writing wasn't for David and Dan. Maybe we
How much
all
are they paying you right now, Chloe? Please disclose. Please disclose.
I get HBO shill.
Objection. HBO shill.
But no, it's like when you look at okay, if you watch the documentary that came out that did nothing as far as behind the scenes secrets. It was cool, but the sheer proximity of how many people make this stupid dragon boob show we watch happen, and so and so's pouring snow, and this guy has to blink 3 times at this time every hour, or the show doesn't go on. And these people have grown up for 10 years, had families, not been able to see their families. I get it. I would be done too. I'd be like, let's call it a day. You know what? Stabber, let's go. Okay. Yeah, they crapped all over our series. But there's always the books, and we can just hold out hope. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. That was it.
It felt to me like in the last season they went for the shocking moments, but not shocking moments that were earned.
Yes.
In other words, your reaction should be, oh my gosh, how did I not see that coming? Your reaction should not be, why the hell did they do that? There's 2 different kinds of shock, right?
Yeah. And it is that butterfly effect. Going back to it, it really is you're missing this plot, but they can't do all that. I get that. We would have a 20-season show if they included some of these cut characters from the books that make the show make sense. Yeah. So really, it's just the scope of the show in general. It's so big. It's huge, and I think it got out of their hands. I think it just got out of their hands. I think they really were just how do I hold all this show? And they lost it.
I think they just tried to connect the dots of the plot and lost track of all the other meat on the bone. They said we need to go A, B, C, D, E, but you need motivation. You need character reasons. You need relationship reasons why you A, B, C, D, E. I mean, the moments in the show that were, I think, the most telling about that were when they went to when they went early in the season before, when they went to the north and got the white and came back. And they did the whole thing in 5 minutes, and you're like, I didn't know that they had motorcycles and hovercraft and stuff. Wow, that's impressive,
Van, I was trying to forget that happened.
Littlefinger's TARDIS.
But that just informed how the whole of the last season was going to be, was more of that. It was more of, we need to get from here to here to here, and so don't ask how that happened. It just did. They got from here to here to here. And for plot leading up to the finale, you can kind of buy it. But when you get to an emotional finale, you need the emotional investment. And when it's illogical and it makes sense, then there's nothing holding it together. So,
and I think part of that is just losing some of the world building elements, because there's so much culture, there's so much different in geography. Dorne is so different, Iron Islands are so different. Some of those places we really got into the culture. Some places like Dorne, we never really scratched the surface of it. Another thing was essentially, they would treat an entire region as if you knock out one family and boom, it's a lawless anarchy zone where nobody's in control.
Until they bring back a random prince out of nowhere, because that's how Dorne works.
Random Prince of Dorne. Yes.
Okay, sure. And the guy didn't even know his name. Just put he did interviews like, I didn't know my actual name.
Yeah.
You're the Prince of Dorne. What? Of course you don't have a name?
Not Quentin.
Oh my god.
No. Yeah.
Yes, question over here.
So, one of my main things is, what did you think about Winterfell not being ruled by a foreign leader when it's Ned Stark's son? How Sansa decided to separate Winterfell from the Seven Kingdoms when
It's still Ned Stark's son. That is the ruler of the Seven.
Yeah, that's so. The question was, how do we feel about Winterfell, or rather the North, being separate from the Seven Kingdoms? So now it's its own independent kingdom, but at the same time, Bran is sitting on the Iron Throne as a Northerner. He was born in the North. He's Ned Stark's son, and I think that's something that the books will have to address.
Yeah.
Because usually your martial support for that would be the force of that other country. So if you're trying to say we're going to have an independent country that might back me up maybe if I'm taken off the throne, and also Dorne and the Iron Islands aren't going to try to succeed at the same time, that's questionable. But I'm not saying you couldn't get there with more background or something else to bolster that. Let's see what you do, George.
I will say this though. Let's be clear. Like the one thing that I think they made it pretty obvious. Bran made it very obvious with his creepy self. He's not really a Stark anymore. Like he has the name, but like he has become. Yeah, he doesn't have the allegiance. He has become this sort of everyman. Because of what he's been through. So,
but at the same time, when somebody rebels, every man is not going to come defend him.
But not only that,
every man can't defend anybody.
They made it very clear he will have no heirs.
Yep.
So the king on the Iron Throne, well, not Iron Throne anymore, the king in the South is a Stark for now.
But it won't be in the future.
But it won't.
And the North has suffered for so long. They've seen the last 2 generations of Starks just butchered, just bled out, just fried in front of the Iron Throne. Thousands of years ago, they conquered their way through the North, and they basically, as well as they could, they did, butcher a bunch of people, but that's, war, whatever. I guess George is saying war's bad, but who knows? Who knows? But, the North fought to be kings in the North, and literally they only bent the knee because they said, our people will be burnt alive by these dragons. There's no way for us to win. There's no way for us to win, so it's better for us to just be safe and say, sure. Sansa, of all people, she was beat in front of the Iron Throne. She bled in front of the Iron Throne. Of course Northern independence is going to be this huge thing because it starts as soon as Ned's head is thrown off of Baelor's Sept. That's when it starts, right there. That moment is when it really riles up in the main series, and it's going to keep going through each character. So there's no way there's no payoff for Northern independence. And a lot of people like to do the whole, economically, it's not smart. Well, there's no food in Westeros right now because someone burnt it. I don't know who. And they're at ground zero either way. It's not, everyone's like, it's nepotism. No, it's really not. The North is going to have to really improve a lot of the things they have. They don't have a lot of trade. Things coming in and out of White Harbor. In the show, they have a lot of crazy costumes that are blues and purples and stuff, but it's that kind of fabric would not make it to the North because that's dyed fabric from out east that's expensive. Trading doesn't happen like that. Infrastructure, there's a lot that's going to be done. The new gift has to be resettled. There's so much missing from that finale, from the we're in the small council now, buddy. There's so much missing there that the books provide those contexts, right? And I think leaving those out obviously was detrimental to our understanding of the finale. We weren't ever going to get them. Let's be real. We know that. We've seen the show. We were never going to get that. But those kind of things are things you think about that they're on even footing. And this is the best moment for the North to break free without causing pain to the South. They're looking at also, this won't hurt the South. And it won't hurt the North for now.
Yeah.
And it does beg the question, who's going to be the ruler after Bran?
And it's going to be a deadlock, right? So I guess that's the whole point. If you're going to go back to, hey, it's going to be 6 votes or the equivalent of 6 votes with every person getting a vote.
Get your independence while you can.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. I think endgame wise, I think we're going to see a different, maybe we'll get a little mashup of a few different kingdoms. We'll move different places. It won't just be, like, oh, well, the north is free and then there's the south. I don't think that's going to happen. I think there's too much at play, but I also think they didn't build enough to talk about that.
Yeah.
They were just like, this would just confuse them. And let's be real, they are, like, thinking, which is stupid. They think our audience is stupid, right? Like, they're literally, like, lowest common denominator, watered down. Here's your info. This is what happened. And it's like, okay, we're a little intelligent. We're intelligent creatures. We can figure it out. So I think that by withdrawing that information, not giving some of that world building, they really screwed themselves.
Yeah.
Do we have who has the mic? Oh, over here.
Unpopular opinion time.
Yes.
We love those.
Myself here, obviously, so far. Myself, my wife, basically all of our friends that watch the show were overall happy with the season overall. With the permission of the panel, can we take the temperature of the room? Who was overall happy with the show?
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Happy with it?
I'll die on
the final
this hill.
season.
Wait, Are we talking about the show as a whole or just the final season? Okay, season 8. All right, were you...
Season 8 was better than season 4. Fight me afterwards.
If you were happy with season 8, can you raise your hand?
Okay. There are people. They exist.
And so,
Took a couple watches.
Plugged into the fandom. My feeling, and I'd love to get your opinion on this, is that the fans got what they had been clamoring for. They've been complaining about 2 or 3 slowly paced seasons, and they got a season that barrels inevitably towards multiple conclusions. And then the fans got what they want and didn't end up wanting it.
Like I said, we're all brats. It is what it is.
I was promised bittersweet. I'm still looking for the sweet.
Oh, well, the bittersweet that George promises, he even has said in interviews, it's going to be bittersweet like Lord of the Rings, and we did get that. We got the Shire was saved, but not for me, Sam. That's
And the pack
what
survived,
ending was.
right?
Yeah,
I mean,
the pack survived, and everything was saved. Jon Snow, the hero of the story, that everyone's like, yes, King Jon Targaryen, Starkgaryen, yeah, give him his Targaryen armor with his Stark stuff on it. No, that's not what happens because he's closing the loop. Exactly, he's closing the loop that Ned started, right? Ned gave this gift of save the children, and he said, give Daenerys this chance. You don't know what she's going to do, and it's literally Jon's season 2, 3, and Storm of Swords plot repeated. There's this line in the books when he's with Ygritte, and Ygritte says to him, like, they're looking at some tower, and she's like, maybe we could come back here, right? After the war, after the conquest. It's the same thing repeated. Dany does the same thing in season 8 at the waterfall, and she says, we could come back here after the war. I mean, it's true, big mood, but I mean, maybe it's like this story isn't as progressive as we all think it is. That's all. Like, George wrote this in the 90s. This was his big idea in the 90s. He passed it on to these guys that obviously weren't going to give us the real story. So what do you want, The books, yes, me too, but...
Instead, you'll get 800 pages of Targaryen history, and you'll like it.
Yeah, eat your green beans and sit down and like it. It's good.
All right, who has the mic?
Oh, he's got the mic.
So I feel like season 8 definitely missed on its higher notes that it was going for, but some of the quieter moments, like the named characters gathering around the hearth in Winterfell before the final conflict, and even Jaime gets captured and Tyrion has a few minutes to talk to him before sending him off on his
good times.
So the quieter moments, I feel like the showrunners still hit. Would you agree, or do you think that those didn't even those didn't carry the 8th season?
Oh no, yeah, they absolutely like Night of the Seven Kingdoms. Let me be honest, that was episode 2 of this season. It was a beautiful episode. Mm-hmm. I mean, ignoring the whole constant everybody go to the crypts. The crypts are safe. Did you guys know the crypts are safe? The crypts are super safe, y'all. That was obnoxious and unnecessary. Like Chloe said, we're not stupid, okay? We know that if
dead people are there.
but no, yeah, the quieter moments and the show has generally always done a good job with those. But yeah, Night of the Seven Kingdoms and that whole everything about the scene around the hearth, but most especially Brienne getting knighted, everything about that was beautiful. What frustrates me is that the people involved with the show, they nominated a bunch of the actors for Emmys, and nobody nominated Gwendolyn Christie, so she nominated herself.
So did Clarice Van Houten did too, girl.
Oh yeah.
Great Sand Mountain
Actually,
for the long
the
night.
Melisandre stuff this season was
amazing.
Yeah,
What
it was great.
art.
It was good.
Melisandre and Theon were the best art.
Oh gosh, if you had told me years ago that I would cry when Theon Greyjoy died, I would have punched you in the face.
You're a good man.
But I did. I bawled my eyes out every time I watched that episode, which was 3 times.
Yep. We were sitting there at the con. I was sobbing.
Yeah.
It's not good.
Mike, yes. Here's the mic.
I'm over here. You might not be able to see my face.
Oh no, yeah, you're right behind the speaker.
So my thought was on the dragon pit scene, which was 10 minutes. And I thought that should have been the finale. It should have been a whole episode of all of the kingdom coming together and negotiating their future.
Yep.
It would have, among other things, given Sansa a chance to really shine and show what she had learned. Is that something you guys think would have been, a good part of the finale, and what sort of stuff would you like to see in something like that?
I mean, I did enjoy Ed Murray hold my beer and sit down. But yes, I mean, the politics are a quintessential part of it, and that's her growth, that's her specialization. She learned so much from Cersei, from Littlefinger, on how to work that side of it, to let her shine, to let her go forward, and not just, sass Dany every couple minutes, I mean, that really would have put her out there in the forefront and showed how she was capable, how she was experienced. And I think that's something we did miss, but once again, we needed those extra episodes.
Yeah, I really hated the Sansa v Dany stuff. I'm sorry, these are, you can dislike these characters if you want, but don't give me 2 strong women bitching at each other, basically. I don't want this. I mean, and honestly, they did it again at the end with Yara. And, it's listen, I get she was backing Dany, but that girl is not stupid. I'm sorry, she might not have been there when Dany went nuts, but, she knows. She's heard things. You just... That was one thing, if I'm, and honestly, the show's never been the greatest with their female interactions, but yeah, that was very, very frustrating. Sansa and Dany are both better than that, and to be honest, the thing was, Dany actually was the one that they were. The writing, it made it seem like she was the one who was kind of trying to be the bigger person and everything. Yes. And so Sansa was just looking like she's just this angry woman, mad that Dany's come into her kingdom and everything. And I get that, but just the attitude and the way everything was written, it was just unnecessary.
So
she can play the game better than that.
I do have arguments though about that, because if you go back and rewatch the scene in episode 2 between them, it's actually a pretty good scene. It's them going back and forth, and they're not being as mean as I thought. I thought they were going to Arya Sansa. I thought it was going to be season 7 all over again. I thought it was going to be, well, I'm going to cut your face off, Sansa. I was like, is that going to happen again? But I was impressed that they spoke in a decent tone for several minutes. No voices were raised yet. That's pretty big, for people that are writing women usually. And we do exist, I guess. But Sansa, my problem was actually they wrote Sansa really smart, but they didn't include there are reasons for Sansa not to trust Daenerys, and they didn't include them. Yes, Daenerys' father did roast half your family right now, your grandpa and your uncle. They got roasted. Why don't bring that history up?
Give Bran a little part there, yeah.
It's a scene that could have happened. So there's so much they could have covered. However, rewatching that scene between them, I do enjoy that. They spoke on a level. Sansa's they exchanged courtesties. You see them playing the game against each other. Sansa's exchanging courtesies. Dany's exchanging courtesies. She's like, "Oh, you're so beautiful. You're of the North." And Sansa's like, "Yeah. So what's going to happen with the North? Now that you mention it, that's a segue." And I think they actually wrote Sansa pretty smart for a couple of the episodes. And a lot of people are like, "Oh, Sansa betrayed Jon," but it's if you're sitting there and you know that something's going to happen that none of us know about apparently, but something's going to happen, that is something that you should say to the one person you were married to and you half trusted partially for your life. I'm worried about this, friendo. What do you think? I don't know. I think they wrote her too smart without any build-up. In the book, Sansa doesn't have a lot of the plot she has in the show. She learns things politically. God. Yeah, thank freaking God. She's in the Vale, happy eating lemon cakes, and her hair's dyed real dark, and she's rocking it, and she's just living her best dream right now of, poisoning your cousin. But, long story short, it's missing those beats in that training. All these kids, all the Stark kids are on a Jedi training quest, right? They each have their superpower, and they just kind of biffed it on those superpowers. So they're here, by the way. I don't know. Like, it could have been worse. The Dany stuff could have been way worse with Sansa.
True.
That's
Yes,
what I'm thankful
yes.
for. I thought it was going to be total, like, well, I don't like you. The first episode was kind of like, I'm going to look at you like this the whole time, and that was a bit much. But I feel like that talk they had in episode 2 and going forward, and especially maybe the last of the Starks, the celebration feast, was like, okay, come on. But it wasn't Arya versus Sansa season 7, so that was nice. That's what I'm thankful for. Because that was awful.
It
Like,
wasn't
that
as
was
bad as it could have been.
That's how I feel about Game of Thrones.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
That's the general consensus. It's not as bad as it could have been.
Yes, question.
There's 2 questions. Why didn't we get more of Arya using her face-off power this last season? And also, are you happy with how Arya's story ended?
I'm going to repeat the question. Just so everyone knows, the question was, why didn't we see more of Arya's faceless manpower, taking the faces, and are we happy with her arc? I think that, she definitely got a high point in that. I think getting that Night King kill, pretty high point right there. And if you just have her be like the Arya ex machina, where she's just taking everybody else out, that makes it a little too simple. But I was kind of happy, and I think Chloe brought this earlier in our Heroes talk, her arc sort of ending on her choosing life, choosing to turn away from death, this thing that she's been trained to kill, her whole life she's become death, and then walking out a different door. I think that was impactful in the broad stroke. Maybe not in the application.
She changed from death to Columbus.
Well,
Maybe not full Columbus.
Yeah, let's hope she doesn't go full Columbus.
Yeah.
Okay.
You never want to go full
Columbus.
It was a good arc.
I was just going to say, the thing about Arya, the thing that kind of hurt me about it was that when I just, in some cases, I wish I didn't know outside the show stuff. Because I thought, wow, they built all that up to her killing the Night King. That's awesome. And then after the show thing, they're like, we just kind of flipped the coin and said, Arya does it. And I'm like, really? It was just that random.
And it was silly. Like, the shoehorn comments, the Melisandre scene, oh my god. The cheese in this season was so much Melisandre. Like, oh, she looks her in the eyes and she's the final, this is the connection. This is the moment that Melisandre, this is why I had that cryptic line at you several seasons ago that now we're choosing to use. It's not a retcon. So the first time I watched it, I was very disappointed. And I was like, good for Maisie Williams, get that paycheck, girl. But... now I'm kind of like, all right, it makes sense. It works. Why not? It's kind of nice in a way. It's like, sure, let her do it. But I like the way her arc went the rest of the season because we don't get to see all of that murder that we've kind of seen in the books for and all that hardship on the road. We get a mini watered down version, right? Everything we're seeing is kind of this watered down kind of presenting to the public version. And for Arya, Beric tells her, choose life. Sandor tells her, choose life. Like, this revenge isn't going to get you anywhere. And everyone bitches about the white horse. Okay, I get it. But it was the symbolism of life. She chose life. A white horse to take her out of there. She chose, things don't always have to be this. And her last lines in the book to Sandor Clegane, when she chooses not to kill him, she says to him, you should have saved my mom. And that's her black and white representation of morality. Arya starts this journey of everything is black and white. So she ends up at the house of literal black and white, right? And she goes there to train, and she can't get rid of her identity. She tries to shed that identity. She tries and tries and tries, but then she goes home, and it's not right because all she's been in is child of war, right? She's been in war this whole time. She's just been murdering and killing and surviving. And she goes home and she can't live like a civilian. In a way, I have a few military friends that it reminds me of what they've discussed, that you don't just go home and things are normal. You can't just go to Sansa's tea time every day and have a good time, right? For Arya, she was never going to be confined in that kind of figure. She tells Ned as much in season 1. And I think her choosing to go west to discover things and try to build a better life for herself is really good self-discovery for her. Every 13-year-old should try it out.
Sorry, Gendry.
Yeah, poor Gendry. He tried so hard.
He did.
Yes, over here.
Oh, I'm in the corner. I don't know if you guys can see me.
We can't.
Yes.
Okay, barely.
Well, so many things about season 8, but I'm gonna just bring it down to one question. I don't know about anybody else, but I was ready to get my heart broken in season 8. I was ready to see maybe some of my favorite characters die off, some get killed, some survive, some villains survive some way, somehow. I was ready for that. I had maybe one of the best deaths in season 8 was Theon.
Yes.
Where, I cried. It was one of the only moments that I was emotionally invested in season 8. Whereas with Cersei's death, a character that we hate, we love to hate. We hate her for the things that she does, but we love her because she is that bitch. She did everything necessary to get where she is. And for her to get that send-off the way she did, to me was completely disrespectful.
I mean,
100%.
Later, he carried this show for how many years, and you disrespect her?
I was so angry.
No, absolutely. And to be honest, like as upsetting as Theon's death was on like that true emotional level, like my biggest, like most upsetting death was that of Jaime's character arc.
Yes. The assassination.
You were sad about it for 5 whole years?
I've been sad about it. I'm like, since season 2.
How much is HBO paying you, Chloe? I want to see those tax returns.
You don't know me.
But yes, the idea of Cersei and Jaime, just going into a basement and dying together. And P.S. when Tyrion goes to find them,
you're perfect.
There's like. They're standing, or they're under this pile of rubble in a giant room where there's only like random piles of rubble. So they could have been standing like 20 feet to the left, and they wouldn't have gotten killed.
Don't get mean to the brick guy. He had a hangover that day.
The brick guy.
Think about this, okay? In the context and the scope of the show, he probably had a hangover.
And I will say one thing to go along with that, though. I was prepared in that long night episode. I don't know if anybody else was there. We were all sitting together, all in the nerd huddle, and ready for half of the characters to get wiped out. Especially when you saw all the characters that were like backed up against the wall. It's like Brienne's about to bite the dust right now. Like I was very surprised the body count wasn't higher. I'm not saying it was everything. I was okay.
We went into it with like half and half, Brienne or Jaime. Who goes? Like one of them's gonna die. Jaime's gonna have the heroic death protected. Like who's gonna go? And then you're like, oh, okay, no one died. That's
and even the dragons, you thought like all of them almost were gonna bite the dust there, and then it turns out, it's
a very confusing
Rhaegal
episode.
Rhaegal was saved for Euro Greyjoy. The Viking sex pirate killer of Jaime Lannister
with magic ballistas on his boats.
The best naval weapon nobody's ever heard of.
We probably have time for one more question.
Well, make it a good one.
You got it.
Yeah, one of them doesn't work that well.
So my my frustration was that I watched the documentary looking for answers, got nothing but nostalgia. They were like, oh, do you remember when we started this years ago, talking to each other but not to us, knowing that we would watch it looking for answers and try to, I don't know, like Disney has like maturity montages, like let's watch Simba grow up walking across this log. And they, for us, with these character arcs, skipped the montages.
And that's when Simba's his sexiest.
Simba's grown up, and Pirate Rock has been taken, and Scar's in charge now. Yeah. Surprise. Like, that was super frustrating.
Yep.
Like, I know Neldenville is coming up. Great, we'll all come. But the character arcs not being well developed, or being developed but not explaining what's in between, there's no way, even reading the books, like, that will, like, stick. So, like, I was, like, trying to find my question. Like, what exactly is my question here? My question is, like, the fact that we're here at this panel, we're also looking for answers. We're all asking you questions, like, it's your responsibility to give us these answers. Answer me.
I wasn't told that I was supposed to bring answers.
HBO is not paying Chloe enough.
Putting us under pressure on each other to mesh this together.
But not the writers.
The documentary literally says the writers are like, oh yeah, we didn't really give a fuck. We just kind of did it, like with the Iron Throne and with Arya killing the Night King. So we're like, oh no, it makes sense. It makes sense. Just look at all these like Easter eggs, put all these puzzle pieces together. It's like, I know that revisiting the fandom a couple years from now, like I'm looking at the fandom in the future is really my question. Like going like, oh yeah, like when we tell our kids about how awesome the 7 seasons of Game of Thrones were. It was amazing. Don't watch the end.
I can't wait to tell my kids, back in my day you couldn't say Daenerys on Twitter.
Moving forward in the fandom, how do we, I know some people are like, oh, it wasn't as bad as it could have been. How do we come together as a fandom to find that common place without filling in that space with what we want to fill it in with?
2030 animated series. I'll show write it. I'm ready. I'm
Sacrificing
showrunner.
the lore.
I mean, listen, the biggest thing I can say, I mean, and I know some people just aren't, big book readers, and these books they're big. And when I say you're not big book readers, I don't even mean you don't read books because they're big. Like, some people just they don't want to read that much. I get it. But, there is so much text out there already, and there's still more to come. But really, between that and podcasts and stuff where they delve into the symbolism and all that stuff, and also just the fandom in general, I think as long as we are good to each other, P.S. Thank you guys. This has been a really great panel. Everybody's, whether or not you disagreed with each other, everybody's been really great. And I think that just continuing to be that way and to sometimes you do just have to take what we're given at face value. And that's just as true with Game of Thrones as it is with anything else. And yes, there's going to be pieces missing for a while, maybe forever. But
how dare you?
John? What is on the wall?
Do you guys have any last thoughts? Because we do need to wrap it up.
Yeah, we got to wrap her up.
No, I think we've spoken our piece. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Tara Lynn's A Geek Saga podcast. If you like what you heard, please check out my website, ageeksaga.com, or consider supporting me on Patreon at patreon.com/ageeksaga.